Imagine this scene, being on horseback and away from your family for weeks at a time, rounding up cattle in an open rangeland and taking all the satisfaction that comes from a hard day's work. That's part of the experience at Cracker Country, a late 1800s era living history museum. The Cattleman reporter Brian Baxter has more from Tampa, Florida.
Well, Cracker Country is a rural Florida living history museum. It was started by the Carlton family, Doyle and Mildred Carlton, in the late 70s. Opened with this house where we're sitting right now, the Carlton House.
It is an exhibit, a living exhibit that is set up at the Florida State Fairgrounds. It depicts Florida living in the late 1800s and early 1900s.
Doyle Carlton III's father founded the exhibit in 1977. His family thought it was important to educate the public about the rich cattle heritage in Florida. But cattlemen were known by another name in Florida during the 1800s.
Well, Florida crackers got their name early on. They would round up the cattle, and the brush was so thick they couldn't use a rope like they do out west. So they would use cow whips, and they would pop and crack the cow whip, which sounds very much like a gunshot, to herd the cattle. And people would hear those whips coming from a long distance. Often they'd say, "Here come the crackers." So that's where the term Florida cracker really came from.
Back in the 1800s, Florida was an open range. So when it come time to go find your cows, you actually had to be a cow hunter. You couldn't swing a rope around because there were too many trees and palmetto bushes, so we used our bull whips to get the cows to move it. Crack it in the air, and it didn't take them long to figure out when they heard the crack of the whip it was time to get going.
Cracker Country expanded to include 13 original 1800s era structures from around the state. Schools in the area participate in tours where students get a hands-on experience of what living in rural Florida was like.
We have 2 school tours a year at Cracker Country, and it targets mostly elementary age kids, and we'll have 25,000, give or take, each year of kids that go through and tour Cracker Country.
It's an all hands-on learning experience. Each group will get to do 7 different activities. They'll all get to make something to take home. They'll all get to make a class-sized jump rope. In the fall, they get to learn how we make cane syrup and actually taste cane syrup. They all get to see how we churn butter and make butter, and they all get to taste fresh homemade butter. So it's a real eye-opener for them.
We have kindergartners that were so interested in the whip, that's all they wanted to do, and was hear the whip crack. And then we have the teenagers that come in, and they really want to know what it was like to be on a cattle drive and the hardships and, you know, living 4 or 5 weeks, sleeping on the ground and riding a horse all day.
For folks at Cracker Country, it's all about giving kids and visitors a unique and memorable experience.
I think when a guest comes here, what they're going to experience is something they can get in very few places, because not only are you going to see museum exhibits, you're going to actually be able to touch it. You're going to get to do what people in 1898 Florida would have been doing.
Starting next year, we will be able to incorporate the cattleman's exhibit with the Cracker Country experience. It'll be a good educational thing for the young people.
I hope that they learn something about the heritage of Florida. People think that Florida wasn't much of a state back in the 1800s, but it was. You know, we were a major cattle producing state.
Cattle were introduced to Florida in 1521 by the Spaniards. The region became the first in North America to raise cattle, and Florida continues to be a major producer of beef cattle.
The Florida cracker cattle developed sort of over a period of time. Genetically, they're almost identical to the Texas Longhorn. They look very, very similar, except the Longhorns have much larger horns than the Florida cracker cow do. They're really beautiful cattle because they come in a wide variety of color patterns. And then it began to develop sort of after the turn of the century. They started experimenting with some of the European breeds. But what really made the Florida cattle industry take off here in the Sunshine State was when they introduced Brahma cattle, because they too were used to heat and humidity. And then it just kind of grew from over the years from that first start.
That's what Cracker Country is all about, celebrating the start of an era that made cattle part of America's heritage.
I think the big takeaway that's important to us is they leave with an understanding of history and its importance. And I think we do a very good job of that.
This is Florida 1898. And if they want to know what it was like, then they need to come here and look at it, because this is it.
It is a very wise culture and a very rich culture that I'm blessed to be a part of.
From Cracker Country in Tampa, Florida, I'm Brian Baxter reporting for NCBA's Cattleman to Cattleman.
Now, if you're headed to Tampa, you can experience Cracker Country, I should say, firsthand. For more information, just log on to our website at cattlemantocattleman.org.